In 2019, the Australian government ran a classified exercise modelling a Strait of Hormuz conflict causing severe fuel shortages across Australia. They knew exactly what would happen and then did nothing. Stage 4 and what follows it maps closely onto the future scenario that net zero planners have been quietly assembling for years. State control of movement, the private car reclassified from right to privilege, populations concentrated in walkable urban hubs, centralised services, fewer vehicles, denser living, 15-minute cities. Australia began as a convict prison. It would be a particular kind of tragedy if it ended the same way. In the last years of World War II, Australia came within days of running out of aviation fuel. The shipping lanes had been severed, mined, threatened by Japanese naval operations across the Pacific. Fuel rationing bit hard. The Royal Australian Air Force cannibalised its own reserves. And the lesson, when it finally came, was written in very simple terms. An island continent that cannot refine its own fuel is a continent that can be brought to its knees without a shot being fired at its shores. So Australia built refineries. The post-war governments, Curtin, Chiefeley, Menzies, Holt, approved a large network of large industrial plants in every major capital. By the mid-1960s, Australia was refining almost everything it consumed. But from the very beginning, those refineries were not publicly owned. They belonged to foreign oil companies: Shell, BP, Caltex, Esso. Boards in London, Rotterdam and Houston, not in Canberra. Australia built its energy backbone and handed the switches to someone else. In 1965, oil was found beneath Bass Strait. Production began in 1969. Within a few years, Australia was producing enough crude to meet the majority of its own demand. It looked like self-sufficiency. It wasn't. The refineries still reported to London. The investment decision still lived on someone else's spreadsheet. When the 1973 oil shock sent petrol queues around the block across America and Europe, Bass Strait insulated Australia just enough for its government to look away. The hard conversation never happened. Then came Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, 1983 to 1996. They didn't close the refineries, but they installed the framework that made every later closure inevitable. Economic rationalism, deregulation, the belief that markets allocate resources better than governments. Under that framework, foreign oil companies were free to treat Australian refineries as commercial assets, not national security assets, just assets. Western Port, 1984. Matraville, 1985. The boards in London ran the numbers. The numbers did not favour Australia. John Howard accepted the closure of Port Stanvac in 2003. The Gillard government watched Shell close Clyde in 2012. and called it a commercial decision. Abbott and Turnbull saw Colonel close in 2014, Balfour Island in 2015. No serious pushback. Morrison spent $211 million in 2021 trying to keep the last two refineries open. A panicked correction to a failure 40 years in the making. 8 refineries down to 2. 90% of Australia's refined fuel imported from Asia, from refineries it did not own, in countries that owed it nothing. Shipped through lanes it could not protect. You did not do this. The Australian public did not close the refineries. You did not invite foreign corporations to own the switches. You did not commission the inquiries, read the warnings and chose to do nothing. In 2013, a retired Air Vice Marshal named John Blackburn warned that Australia's fuel dependence had become a critical national security vulnerability. He lobbied every government after that. In 2019, the Australian government ran a classified exercise modelling a Strait of Hormuz conflict causing severe fuel shortages across Australia. They knew exactly what would happen and then did nothing. That is not your failure, that is theirs. Politicians on both sides who chose efficiency over resilience. Foreign corporations whose first loyalty was to shareholders in London, Rotterdam and Houston. Not to farmers who needed diesel, not to truckers who moved the food, not to the country that housed their refineries. Consider what fuel dependency means beyond the servo queue. The Australian Defence Force runs on the same imported fuel as everyone else. The same supply chains, the same tankers, the same choke points. As of late 2026, Australia had 29 days of jet fuel, 32 days of diesel. A military that cannot fuel its aircrafts cannot defend its airspace. A navy that cannot fuel its ships cannot protect its coastline. Australia has spent billions on submarines, fighters, destroyers. The fuel to operate them runs out in less than a month. On the 30th of March 2026, National Cabinet agreed to the National Fuel Security Plan. 4 stages. Australia is currently at Stage 2. Stage 2, keeping Australia moving. Fuel excise halved, emergency legislation to underwrite imports. Australians asked voluntarily to use less. Stage 3, targeted action. Government directing fuel to priority uses. Demand reduction by instruction, not request. Stage 4, formal rationing. Spending caps at the pump, managed queues, the state deciding who drives and who stays home. And when trucks can't get fuel, shelves empty within days. When farms can't get diesel, harvests don't move. The National Farmers Federation has already warned of food prices increasing by up to 50%. Supply chains that took decades to build can seize in weeks. We are at Stage 2, one sustained disruption from the conversation no government wants to have. Stage 4 and what follows it maps closely onto the future scenario that net zero planners have been quietly assembling for years. State control of movement,
The private car reclassified from right to privilege. Populations concentrated in walkable urban hubs. Centralised services. Fewer vehicles. Denser living. 15-minute cities. A fuel crisis is a remarkably efficient way to accelerate all of it. Add to that a road network increasingly dense with cameras, smart sensors and monitoring systems that know exactly where you went, when you left and in what vehicle. And empty shelves. A population that cannot drive far and cannot get food delivered either. A government that spent 40 years creating the conditions for a fuel crisis now holds the legal architecture to decide your right to move, to control what reaches your shelves and to watch every kilometre you travel. Australia began as a convict prison. It would be a particular kind of tragedy if it ended the same way. Whether that is incompetence finally finding its shape or something that was always the destination is a question worth sitting with.